I stood in the first-class lounge at JFK, watching my sister-in-law check her reflection in every available surface, and felt the weight of 2 lifetimes pressing down on my shoulders. "Your seat is 2A, right?" Vanessa asked, not looking at me. She was too busy adjusting her designer sunglasses, the ones my husband had bought her for her birthday. The ones that cost more than my mother's monthly rent. "Window seat?" I took a sip of my champagne, letting the bubbles dance on my tongue, and said nothing. In my previous life, I would have already been stammering, already been apologizing for having something she wanted, satiety. I would have been mentally calculating whether I could survive a coach seat, whether my back would hurt too much, whether it was selfish to prioritize my own comfort over Vanessa's needs, but that Emma was dead. She'd died on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when her brake lines failed and her car slammed into a concrete barrier at 60 miles per hour. I was someone else. Now. Someone harder. Someone who knew exactly what the people around me were capable of. "Emma." Vanessa finally turned to me, and her smile was the same smile she'd worn at my funeral. I knew because I'd watched from somewhere beyond, helpless and furious, as she'd dabbed at dry eyes and accepted condolences while wearing my favorite Hermes scarf. The one Marcus had given me for our 4th anniversary. The one she'd taken from my closet before my body was even cold. "You know I get claustrophobic in coach. And with everything I'm going through with the divorce." There was no divorce. There had never been a divorce. Vanessa's marriage to David Thornton was as solid as they came. They were partners in crime, quite literally. But in my first life, I hadn't known that. I'd believed every lie that fell from her perfectly glossed lips. I'd believed her when she said David was cheating. I'd believed her when she showed me fake text messages. I'd believed her when she cried on my shoulder and told me she felt so alone, so abandoned, so desperate for someone to understand. I'd been such a fucking fool. "Please." She reached out and touched my hand, her perfectly manicured nails grazing my skin. Her nails were freshly done. Ballet pink, my husband's favorite color. She wore it on her nails, her lips, even her toes. I'd noticed her shoes off under the table at last week's family dinner, her feet curled around Marcus's calf while she smiled at me across the table and complimented my cooking. "You're so good to me. You're the only one who understands." I understood perfectly. I understood that in 6 hours, her flight, my first-class seat on Flight 2847 to London, would be canceled due to mechanical failure. I understood that all passengers would be rebooked on alternative flights, except those in first class would be prioritized on the next available departure, just 3 hours later. I understood that coach passengers, like I would be after this generous swap, would be stuck in JFK for 18 hours due to a perfect storm of air traffic control strikes and weather delays across the Atlantic. But most importantly, I understood what I hadn't known in my first life. That while I was trapped in the airport, exhausted and unable to reach anyone because my phone had died and I'd forgotten my charger, Vanessa would make it to London in time for the emergency shareholders meeting of my husband's company. The meeting where she would pretend to be me, using a power of attorney I'd foolishly signed, and vote away my shares to a shell company she and my husband controlled. That had been the beginning of the end. 6 months later, I'd been dead. My brake lines mysteriously cut. My life insurance policy, recently doubled at my husband's insistence, paid out to my grieving widower. $2 million. That's what my life had been worth to them. $2 million split between my husband and his sister, who'd been fucking each other since high school and saw me as nothing more than a useful idiot with good connections and a trusting nature. "Of course," I said, and watched her face light up with triumph. "You take 2A. I'll manage and coach." "You're an angel," Vanessa breathed, already reaching for my boarding pass with greedy fingers. "I'll make it up to you, I promise. When I get back, we'll have a spa day. My treat." There would be no spa day. There would be no coming back, not for her, not in the way she imagined. But I smiled and handed her the pass because I knew something else too. I knew that the first-class rebooking wouldn't be to just any flight. It would be to Flight 2849, departing 3 hours later, the one that was supposed to make up for the mechanical failure of 2847. The flight that would be diverted to Reykjavik due to a medical emergency 45 minutes into the journey. The flight that would sit on the tarmac in Iceland for 14 hours while they sorted out the passenger, who'd had a massive heart attack and couldn't be moved. The flight that would make Vanessa miss the shareholders' meeting entirely, even though she'd been so sure, so confident, that she'd planned it all perfectly. And I knew one more thing, the most delicious detail of all. I knew that my coach ticket, despite the delays, would eventually get me on a direct flight that would arrive in London a full 6 hours before Vanessa's diverted disaster made it back on track. 6 hours, just enough time to walk into that boardroom and burn their entire plan to ashes. "Thank you so much," Vanessa cooed, clutching my boarding pass like a winning lottery ticket. "You're the best sister-in-law anyone could ask for." "I know," I said softly, and this time my smile was genuine. She gathered her things, 3 Louis Vuitton bags, all of which I knew Marcus had charged to our joint credit card, and click-clacked away on her Louboutins toward the gate. I watched her go, this woman who'd pretended to love me while planning my death and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Safe flight, darling. Can't wait to hear about the trip. Love you." I stared at those 2 words, love you. He'd said them to me 1,000 times over the past 5 years of our marriage. He'd whispered them during sex, murmured them over breakfast, texted them from business trips, and every single time, he'd been lying. I typed back, "Love you too." Because I could lie just as well as he could. Better, even. Another text came through, this one from my lawyer. My real lawyer, not the one Marcus thought I used. "Everything is ready, just give me the signal." "Not yet," I replied. "Let them board first. Let them think they've won. I had time. I had all the time in the world. The first time I'd lived through this day, I'd been 32 years old, married to Marcus Chen for 5 years, and still clinging to the naive belief that kindness would be rewarded. I'd been working as a marketing consultant, bringing in a decent income, but nothing spectacular. My real value to Marcus had never been my money. It had been my connections. My father had died when I was 25, leaving me as the sole heir to his small but profitable manufacturing company. I'd sold it a year later, not wanting the responsibility, and used the money to pay off my student loans and invest the rest conservatively. But before I'd sold it, my father's company had done significant business with Chen Industries. My father and Marcus's father had been close friends, partners in several ventures. When my father died, Marcus's father, Robert Chen, had been kind to me, supportive, almost paternal. It was Robert who'd introduced me to Marcus at my father's funeral. "My son," he'd said, placing a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "He's a good boy. He'll take care of you." And I'd believed him, because I was 25 and grieving and desperate for someone to lean on. Marcus had been charming, attentive. He'd called me every day for a month after the funeral just to check in. He'd taken me to dinner, to museums, to long walks in Central Park where he'd listened to me talk about my father and held my hand and made me feel less alone. We'd started dating 3 months after my father's death. We'd gotten engaged a year later, married 6 months after that. It had all seemed so natural, so right, like fate. I'd been too stupid to see it for what it was, a carefully orchestrated con. Robert Chen had died 2 years into my marriage, and that's when everything had started to shift. Marcus had inherited control of Chen Industries along with his sister Vanessa, but there was a catch in Robert's will. Robert had never trusted his children completely. He'd seen something in them that worried him, some lack of moral fiber, and so he'd divided his shares carefully. Marcus got 40%, Vanessa got 20%, and I got 25%, with the remaining 15% split among key executives. Robert had left me those shares specifically with a personal letter explaining why. "You have your father's integrity," he'd written, "his vision, his heart. I know you'll use these shares to keep my children honest, to guide the company in the right direction. Trust your instincts, Emma. Don't let anyone convince you to give up your voice." I'd cried when I read that letter. I'd felt honored, overwhelmed, determined to live up to Robert's faith in me. And Marcus had been so supportive, so proud. He'd held me and told me his father was right, that I was special, that we'd run the company together and make Robert proud. I'd believed him. God, I'd believed every word. The reality was that Marcus had been furious, Those shares were supposed to be his. He'd been counting on inheriting 65% of the company, enough to have total control. Instead, he had to deal with me and my 25%, which meant he needed my vote for any major decisions. At first, he'd tried to be subtle about it, suggesting I was too busy with my consulting work to attend board meetings, offering to represent my interests at votes, explaining complex financial matters in ways that made me feel stupid and overwhelmed. But I'd insisted on being involved. I'd gone to every meeting, I'd asked questions, I'd voted my conscience, and that's when they'd decided I had to go. The plan had been elegant in its simplicity. Get me on a plane to London while they held an emergency shareholders meeting in New York. Use a forged power of attorney to vote my shares. Transfer them to a shell company owned by Vanessa. Once the transfer was complete, divorce me and take everything else in the settlement. If I fought back, if I found evidence, if I became a problem, well, accidents happened. Brake lines failed. People died. In my first life, the plan had worked perfectly. The flight attendant had called my row and I'd gathered my bags. A worn weekender I'd had since college because Marcus said expensive luggage was wasteful and prepared to board. That's when Vanessa had appeared, tears streaming down her face, talking about how she couldn't handle being trapped in coach, how her therapist said she needed space, how she was barely holding it together after discovering her husband's affair. All lies. Her husband wasn't having an affair. She was with my husband, her own brother. But I hadn't known that then. I'd just seen a woman in pain, my husband's sister, someone I was supposed to love and support. So I'd given her my seat without hesitation, without even thinking about it, because that's what good people did. They helped. They sacrificed. They put others first. I'd spent 18 hours in JFK eating overpriced airport food and sleeping on hard plastic chairs while my phone died, and I missed call after call from my assistant trying to reach me about the emergency shareholders meeting that I didn't know had been scheduled. By the time I'd made it to London, confused and exhausted and still not understanding what had happened, it had been too late. The vote had been cast. My shares, 25% of Chen Industries, left to me by a man who'd trusted me to do the right thing, had been transferred to Vanessa's shell company, registered in the Cayman Islands under a name I'd never heard of. Marcus had been so apologetic when I'd finally gotten through to him. So concerned. He'd been in meetings all day, he said. His phone had been off. He'd had no idea about the shareholder vote. Vanessa must have organized it. She'd been so stressed about her divorce, she must have gotten confused about the dates. He'd held me while I cried and told me it was just a paperwork mix-up, easily fixed. We'd get the lawyers involved, sort everything out. It wasn't a big deal. He'd made love to me that night in our London hotel room with unusual tenderness, whispering that we were in this together, that it was us against the world, that he'd never let anything hurt me. 3 days later, I'd signed more papers he'd prepared, thinking I was correcting the error. I'd actually been signing away everything else I owned. It had taken months for me to realize what had happened. Months of lawyers and meetings and discovery, of watching my husband's face grow colder every time I asked questions, of Vanessa's smirks becoming less subtle, of realizing that the sister-in-law who'd cried on my shoulder was the same woman who'd been sleeping with my husband since before I'd even met him. By the time I understood the full scope of their betrayal, I was penniless, living in a studio apartment in Queens with a roommate who stole my food, and my husband was filing for divorce on grounds of mental instability. She's become paranoid, Marcus had told his lawyer, his voice dripping with false concern. She's making wild accusations about fraud and conspiracies. I think she needs help. Professional help. I'd tried to fight. I'd found a lawyer who'd taken my case on contingency. I'd started digging through financial records, looking for proof. And I'd found it, emails between Marcus and Vanessa going back 7 years, back to before we'd even gotten married, laying out their entire plan. The day I'd told my lawyer I had evidence, the day I'd printed out those emails and put them in a safe deposit box, was the day Marcus had decided I needed to die. The brake line failure had come 2 weeks later. I remembered every second of it. The feeling of the pedal going soft under my foot, the moment of confusion as I pressed harder and nothing happened, the terror as my car accelerated toward the intersection as I realized I couldn't stop, as I saw the concrete barrier rushing toward me, the impact, the pain, the darkness, and then nothing. For a time that felt like seconds and centuries all at once, there was nothing. Until I'd woken up in my childhood bedroom, 22 years old, with my phone buzzing next to my pillow and my mother calling up the stairs. That breakfast was ready. The text on my phone had read, "Morning, babe. Can't wait for our date tonight. I think I'm falling for you. M. Marcus. 10 years in the past. Before the marriage, before the engagement, before Robert Chen's death and the inheritance and all of it. I'd run to the bathroom and thrown up, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn on the faucet. My mother had knocked on the door, worried, and I'd told her I was fine, just a stomach bug, I'd be okay. But I wasn't okay. I was 22 again, living in my mother's house, attending Columbia University, and somehow I remembered everything. Every moment of the next 10 years, every betrayal, every lie, every second of that final car crash. I'd spent that entire day locked in my room, trying to understand what had happened. Was it a dream? A psychotic break? Some kind of supernatural intervention? It didn't matter. Whether this was real or not, whether I'd actually traveled back in time or was just hallucinating in a hospital bed somewhere, I had knowledge. I had power. I knew what Marcus and Vanessa would do, and I had a choice to make. I could avoid Marcus entirely. I could never go on that date, never fall in love, never get married. I could protect myself by staying away. But that felt like running, like letting them win. So I'd made a different choice. I decided to play the long game. I decided to marry Marcus Chen again, to let him think he was winning, to let them all think I was the same naive, trusting fool I'd been before. And then I decided to destroy them. For weeks after that first morning, I'd debated whether I was insane, whether any of this was real. I'd gone to my date with Marcus that night, studying his face for any sign that he knew what he was planning, what he'd do to me 10 years from now. But he'd been perfect, charming and funny and attentive. He'd taken me to a nice restaurant, asked about my classes, told me about his work at his father's company. He'd walked me home and kissed me goodnight with just the right amount of hesitancy, like he was afraid I might push him away. I'd wanted to scream at him, to accuse him, to hurt him the way he would hurt me. But I'd smiled and kissed him back and told him I'd had a wonderful time. Because I knew something he didn't. I knew the future. And I was going to use it to make sure that future never happened. The next 10 years had been the longest of my life. Longer even than the first time I'd lived them, because this time I'd known what was coming. I'd had to smile at Vanessa across holiday dinners while remembering her wearing my scarf at my funeral. I'd had to make love to Marcus while remembering the emails where he'd discussed killing me. I'd had to pretend to be happy and in love and trusting while every day I was building my case, gathering my evidence, preparing my revenge. I'd changed things. Small things at first. I'd kept my own bank account, insisted on a prenup that protected my father's inheritance. I'd hired my own lawyer, not the one Marcus had suggested. I'd started documenting everything, every conversation, every financial transaction, every suspicious moment, and I'd hacked Marcus's laptop. It had been surprisingly easy. Marcus was arrogant enough to believe I didn't know anything about computers, that I was just a pretty face with good connections. He'd never bothered to secure his devices, never thought I'd be smart enough to install keylogging software and backdoor access. I'd been downloading his emails for 7 years. Every message he'd sent to Vanessa about their plan, every detail of their affair, every step of their scheme to steal from me and eventually kill me, I'd saved it all to an encrypted cloud drive that Marcus didn't know existed, protected by passwords he could never guess, backed up in 3 different locations. I'd also changed other things, bigger things. When Robert Chen had told me he was planning to leave me shares in his will, I'd begged him not to. I'd cried and told him it was too much responsibility, that I wasn't ready, that I'd disappoint him. But Robert had been adamant. "You have something my children lack," he'd told me. "Integrity, honor. The shares are yours, Emma. Use them well." So I'd accepted them just like before, but this time I'd been ready. This time I'd known exactly what Marcus and Vanessa would try to do. And I'd prepared accordingly. I'd set up my own shell companies, my own offshore accounts, my own carefully constructed web of financial protections. I'd moved assets around, created paper trails, established relationships with key board members behind Marcus's back. I'd spent 10 years building a trap, and now sitting in this airport lounge watching Vanessa walk toward the gate with my boarding pass, I was finally going to spring it. My phone buzzed. Another text from my lawyer. "The DA has reviewed the evidence. He's ready to move as soon as you give the word." I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I'd been working toward for 10 years, for 2 lifetimes. "Go," I typed. Within minutes, I received a confirmation. Arrest warrants had been issued for Marcus Chen and Vanessa Chen Thornton on charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit murder. But the arrests wouldn't happen yet. Not until after Vanessa was on that plane, trapped in the air, unable to warn Marcus or escape. Not until after I'd walked into that shareholders meeting and revealed their entire plan to the board. I wanted them to feel it. The shock, the betrayal, the moment when they realized they'd lost everything. The way I'd felt when my brakes had failed and I'd known in those final seconds that my husband had killed me. The announcement came over the intercom 20 minutes later. Ladies and gentlemen, we regret to inform you that Flight 2847 to London Heathrow has been canceled due to a mechanical issue. All first-class passengers will be rebooked on Flight 2849, departing from Gate 23 in 3 hours. Coach passengers, please see the customer service desk for rebooking options. I watched the first-class lounge erupt in annoyed murmurs. A businessman next to me swore and pulled out his phone. A woman in a power suit demanded to speak to a manager. But they'd all be fine. They'd all get on Flight 2849 in 3 hours, just like the airline had promised. They'd all be trapped in Reykjavik by tomorrow morning, but they'd be fine. My phone lit up with a text from Vanessa. Flight canceled? Mechanical issue? This is a nightmare. I took my time responding, counting to 30 before I typed, "Oh no, that's terrible. Are you okay? They're rebooking me on the next first-class flight," she replied, "leaving in 3 hours. This better not make me late for our spa appointments in London." We didn't have spa appointments in London. We'd never had spa appointments. That was just the cover story. Vanessa had told her husband David, who thought she was going on a girls' trip with me. In reality, Vanessa was going to London to commit fraud while I was supposed to be trapped in JFK, unable to stop her. "I'm sure you'll make it," I typed. "Have a good flight." "You too. See you in London. XOXO. I set my phone down and signaled to the bartender. "Another champagne, please." "Rough day?" he asked sympathetically as he refilled my glass. "Not at all," I said. "It's actually turning out perfectly." He gave me a strange look but said nothing. I tipped him well and settled back to wait. My coach flight was scheduled to depart in 2 hours. It would be delayed, of course. The ripple effects of Flight 2847's cancellation would cascade through the system, delaying departures and creating chaos. But unlike in my first life, I knew exactly how long the delay would be. 4 hours and 17 minutes. I'd lived through it once, counting every second, desperately trying to charge my phone, at one of the few working outlets in the terminal, watching in confusion as I missed call after call from my assistant. This time, I had 3 portable chargers, a comfortable seat in the lounge that I'd paid for with my own money, and a clear understanding of exactly what was happening and why. This time, I was in control. I pulled out my laptop and reviewed my presentation one more time. The one I'd be giving to the Chen Industries Board in approximately 14 hours. It was comprehensive, devastating. It included 7 years of emails between Marcus and Vanessa detailing their affair and their plan to defraud me, financial records showing the shell companies they'd set up to receive my stolen shares, text messages discussing the forged power of attorney evidence of insider trading and embezzlement that Marcus had committed, and, most damningly, the emails discussing my murder. That last part had been the hardest to preserve. In my first life, those emails had been deleted. Before I'd ever found them, Marcus had done a full system wipe after my death, destroying the evidence. But in this life, I'd captured them in real time. I'd been keylogging his computer when he'd written to Vanessa, "She's becoming a liability. She's asking too many questions about the shares." And Vanessa had replied, "Then we need to handle it. Permanently. You sure?" Marcus had written, "It's a big step. We've come too far to back out now," Vanessa had sent back. "Besides, you have that life insurance policy, $2 million. We could start over somewhere warm, just you and me, the way it should have been." "Okay," Marcus had written. "I'll find someone." And 3 weeks later, "It's done. I've got a guy. He'll cut the brake lines. It'll look like an accident. Faulty maintenance. No one will suspect anything." "When?" Vanessa had asked. "Soon. Next month, maybe. I need to make sure the insurance is all in order first." Reading those emails again now, even after 10 years and a whole second lifetime, made my hands shake. The casual way they discussed my death. Like I was a problem to be solved, not a person. not someone who'd loved Marcus, who'd trusted him, who'd built a life with him. I closed my laptop and took a long drink of champagne. In 8 hours, Vanessa would be in the air, unreachable. In 12 hours, I'd be in London, walking into a boardroom full of people who thought they knew me as Marcus's sweet, naive wife. In 13 hours, they'd know the truth, and Marcus and Vanessa would lose everything. The delay started exactly as I remembered it. First, a vague announcement about gate congestion, then another delay for crew scheduling, then a mechanical issue with the actual aircraft that required maintenance, 4 hours and 17 minutes. Just like before, around me, coach passengers were losing their minds. A mother with 3 small children was near tears, trying to comfort her kids while juggling diaper bags and snacks. A college student was on his phone, arguing with someone about missing his connecting flight. An elderly couple sat in silence, holding hands, looking exhausted. In my first life, I'd been one of them. Frustrated, scared, alone. This time, I watched it all from the comfort of the first-class lounge, sipping champagne and occasionally checking my phone for updates. At hour 2, I got a text from Marcus. "How's the airport? Hope you're not too bored." He had no idea I was delayed. He thought I was in the air by now, safely en route to London, unable to interfere with his plans. "Just boarded," I lied, settling in with a book. Love you too," he sent back. "Have a safe flight." I wondered if he felt anything when he typed those words. Guilt, regret, or just smug satisfaction that his stupid wife was walking right into his trap? At hour 3, my real lawyer called. "Emma, just wanted to update you. The warrants are ready to execute. We're just waiting for your signal." "Not yet," said Okumain. "Wait until I'm in the air. I don't want them getting wind of anything before Vanessa's plane takes off." Understood. And the board meeting? I've confirmed with Richard Chen. He's called an emergency session for tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. London time. He's told them it's about a potential acquisition, so they'll all be there. Including Marcus? Including Marcus. He thinks he's about to announce the acquisition of my shares. He has no idea I'll be there. My lawyer chuckled. I almost feel sorry for him. Almost. "Don't," I said. "He doesn't deserve your pity." At hour 4, the announcement finally came. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're pleased to announce that Flight 2847B to London Heathrow is now ready for boarding. We apologize for the delay and thank you for your patience." I gathered my things and made my way to the gate. The boarding process was chaotic. People were angry, tired, desperate to just get on the plane and get this nightmare over with. I found my seat in row 42, a middle seat between a snoring businessman and a college kid with headphones turned up so loud I could hear every word of his aggressive rap music. It was uncomfortable, cramped, the complete opposite of the first-class luxury Vanessa was experiencing. And I'd never been happier. As the plane pushed back from the gate, I pulled out my phone and sent one final text to my lawyer. "In the air. Execute the warrants." Within minutes, FBI agents would be showing up at Marcus's office with an arrest warrant. But Marcus wouldn't be there. He'd left early, telling his assistant he had a meeting. In reality, he was probably already celebrating with champagne and his mistress, thinking he'd won. The agents would wait. They'd stake out his apartment. And when he finally came home, they'd be there to arrest him. But Vanessa was already trapped. 30,000 feet in the air on Flight 2849, with no idea that her entire world was about to collapse. I smiled and then closed my eyes as the plane took off, leaving behind the chaos of JFK and heading toward London, toward revenge, toward justice, toward everything they'd stolen from me in my first life and everything I was about to take from them in this one. The flight attendant came by with drinks. "Would you like anything?" she asked. "Water, please," I said, "and a blanket if you have one." She brought both, and I settled in for the long flight ahead. 9 hours to London. 9 hours to review my notes one more time, to rehearse exactly what I'd say, to prepare for the moment I'd been waiting 10 years, 2 lifetimes, to experience. 9 hours until I walked into that boardroom and watched Marcus's face when he realized what I'd done. I pulled out my laptop and opened the presentation one more time. Slide 1, Chen Industries, a legacy of fraud. Slide 2, timeline of the conspiracy, starting with Marcus and Vanessa's affair in high school, continuing through our marriage, ending with the planned murder. Slide 3, email evidence, carefully redacted to hide nothing important but formatted for maximum impact. Slide 4, Financial evidence showing the shell companies, the money laundering, the insider trading. Slide 5, the power of attorney forgery with forensic analysis proving it was fake. Slide 6, text messages discussing my murder. Slide 7, my recommendation, immediate termination of Marcus Chen as CEO, criminal referral to law enforcement, full audit of company finances, and my assumption of acting CEO role pending board vote. It was perfect, comprehensive, undeniable. I'd spent 10 years building this case, 10 years of gathering evidence, making connections, preparing for this exact moment, and in approximately 13 hours, it would all come together. The businessman next to me shifted in his sleep, his elbow digging into my ribs. The college kid's music got louder. The baby 3 rows back started crying. I didn't care. I barely noticed. All I could think about was Marcus's face. The moment when he'd understand that I'd beaten him, that I'd known all along, that every smile, every I love you, every intimate moment over the past 10 years had been a lie, just like his had been, that I'd played him better than he'd ever played me. The flight attendant's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our cruising altitude. You're now free to move about the cabin. We'll be coming through with our meal service shortly. I glanced at my watch. 8 hours and 42 minutes to London. 8 hours and 42 minutes until I destroyed Marcus and Vanessa Chen. I opened my laptop and started writing my opening statement for the board meeting, typing furiously, my fingers flying over the keys. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, it began. Thank you for coming on such short notice. I have some disturbing information to share with you about the leadership of this company. Information that will shock you. Information that will change everything. I paused, reading over what I'd written, and then I added, information that Marcus and Vanessa Chen spent 10 years trying to keep from you. Information that cost a woman her life, or would have if she hadn't been smart enough to come back from the dead. I stopped. Deleted that last sentence. Too dramatic, too revealing. They could never know about my rebirth. They could never know that I'd lived this all before. They'd think I was insane, and that would undermine everything. No, I had to be careful. I had to present this as a careful investigation, years in the making, not as the result of supernatural knowledge. I rewrote information that Marcus and Vanessa Chen have been hiding for 10 years. Information that, had they succeeded in their plan, would have led to my death and the theft of millions of dollars from this company and its shareholders. Better, more professional, more believable. I continued, writing, crafting each word carefully, building my case brick by brick. By the time the flight attendant came by with dinner, a questionable chicken dish that looked like it had been created in a laboratory, I had 17 pages of notes and a complete presentation ready to go. I ate mechanically, not tasting anything, my mind already in that boardroom, already watching Marcus's face crumble as I revealed his crimes. The businessman woke up and ordered a beer. The college kid finally took off his headphones and struck up a conversation with the flight attendant, flirting shamelessly. The baby stopped crying, and I sat in my middle seat in row 42, drinking terrible airplane wine and feeling more powerful than I ever had in either of my lives. Because I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't the naive girl who'd trusted the wrong people. I wasn't the woman who'd died confused and betrayed, not understanding what had happened until it was too late. I was Emma Park. I'd been given a second chance, and I was going to make it count. We landed at Heathrow at 6:47 a.m. local time, 13 minutes ahead of schedule. I cleared customs quickly. I'd learned in my first life to dress well for international travel, and this time I was wearing an expensive suit that made the customs agent barely glance at my passport before waving me through. I took a taxi straight to my hotel, not the one Vanessa and I were supposed to share, but the Savoy, one of London's finest. I'd booked it months ago under my maiden name, using a credit card Marcus didn't know about. The suite was beautiful, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Thames, a marble bathroom with a soaking tub, a king-size bed with Egyptian cotton sheets. I dropped my bags and immediately called my lawyer. I'm here, I said. Status update? Marcus has been arrested, my lawyer said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. FBI picked him up at his apartment last night around 9 p.m. He's being held pending arraignment. Did he say anything? Asked for his lawyer and then refused to talk. Smart move, but it won't help him. The evidence is overwhelming. And Vanessa? Her flight landed in Reykjavik about 2 hours ago. They're still on the ground. Medical emergency, some passenger had a heart attack. She sent about 50 texts to Marcus, all of which are being logged as evidence. She has no idea he's been arrested. I smiled. Perfect. The board meeting is confirmed for 10 a.m. Richard Chen has the conference room booked. He's told the other board members that you'll be presenting new information about a potential acquisition. Good. Let them think it's routine. The shock will be better that way. Emma, my lawyer said, his voice turning serious. Are you sure you want to do this in person? We could handle the presentation remotely. Keep you out of the line of fire. No, I said firmly. I need to be there. I need to see his face. Marcus won't be there. He's in custody. Not Marcus, I said. The board, the people who trusted him, the people who'll have to decide what happens next. I need them to see me, to understand that I'm not a victim, that I'm not weak, that I'm the person Robert Chen thought I was when he left me those shares. My lawyer was quiet for a moment. Then, you're absolutely right. I'll see you there at 9:30. We'll go in together. I hung up and looked at my watch. 7:15 a.m. I had less than 3 hours. I ordered room service, coffee, eggs, toast, and ate while reviewing my presentation one more time. Then I showered, did my makeup carefully, and changed into my best suit. Navy blue Armani, perfectly tailored. I looked like someone who belonged in a boardroom. Someone who knew exactly what she was doing. At 9:00 a.m., my lawyer called from the lobby. Ready? Ready, I said. The taxi ride to Chen Industries' London office took 15 minutes. It was a beautiful building in the financial district, all glass and steel, with the company's logo prominently displayed on the front. I'd been here before in my first life, but I'd always been with Marcus, always playing the supportive wife role, smiling and nodding while he talked business with his colleagues. This time, I walked in alone, my head high, my briefcase in hand, and I felt like I owned the place. Because, in a way, I did. I owned 25% of it. And after today, I'd own a hell of a lot more. Richard Chen was waiting in the lobby. He was Marcus's uncle, Robert's younger brother, and he'd never liked his nephew. He'd voted against Marcus becoming CEO, argued that he was too young and too arrogant, but he'd been outvoted. Now, seeing him smile at me, I knew I'd made the right call, bringing him into my confidence. Emma, he said warmly, shaking my hand. You look ready for battle. I am, I said, Maninga. Thank you for arranging this. Thank you, he said, unless my brother would be proud. He always knew you were special. We took the elevator to the 20th floor where the boardroom was located. My lawyer was already there, setting up the presentation equipment. The other board members started arriving at 9:45. Patricia Wong, the CFO, James Morrison, head of operations, Sarah Chen, another of Robert's siblings, David Thornton, yes, Vanessa's husband, who had no idea his wife was in Reykjavik right now, trapped on a plane, planning to commit fraud. They all greeted me warmly, if somewhat confusedly. Emma, what a nice surprise. We didn't know you'd be in London. How are you, dear? I smiled and made small talk, watching the clock tick toward 10 on talk. At 9:58, Richard called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I know this is unusual, but Emma has brought some information to my attention that requires immediate board action. Emma, the floor is yours. I stood up, walked to the front of the room, and looked at the faces staring back at me. Curious? Friendly, trusting, that was about to change. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, thank you for coming. I have some disturbing information to share with you about the leadership of this company. Information that will shock you. Information that will change everything. I clicked to the first slide. For the past 7 years, Marcus Chen and his sister, Vanessa Chen Thornton, have been engaged in a conspiracy to defraud me of my shares in this company and ultimately to murder me. The room erupted. What? Patricia Wong looked horrified. Emma, that's a very serious accusation. I have proof, I said calmly. Please let me finish. I clicked to the next slide. The timeline. It starts in high school, when Marcus and Vanessa began an incestuous relationship. They've been lovers for 20 years, even after Vanessa married David. David Thornton went pale. That's impossible. I have emails, I said. And photos, lots of photos. If you'd like to see them, I can provide them, but I warn you, they're explicit. No one asked to see them. I continued, walking them through the entire conspiracy. The plan to marry me for my connections, Robert's unexpected decision to leave me shares, their growing resentment of my presence, the decision to steal my shares, the forged power of attorney, the plan to divorce me and take everything, and finally, the decision to kill me. I showed them the emails. All of them. Starting with the innocent-seeming messages about family dinners and business meetings, gradually escalating to discussions of fraud, and finally, horribly, culminating in Marcus's message, "I'll find someone." And Vanessa's response, "Make it look like an accident." By the time I finished, the room was silent. Patricia Wong was crying. Sarah Chen looked like she might be sick. David Thornton had his head in his hands. "This is," Richard Chen finally spoke, his voice shaking. "This is beyond anything I imagined. Emma, I am so deeply sorry. On behalf of this family, on behalf of this company, I don't want an apology," I said. "I want action." Marcus has been arrested by the FBI. Vanessa is currently in Reykjavik, trapped on a diverted flight with no idea any of this has come to light. And I want this board to take immediate action. "What do you propose?" Patricia asked. First, immediate termination of Marcus Chen as CEO and removal from the board. Second, a full forensic audit of the company's finances to determine the extent of his embezzlement and fraud. Third, criminal referrals for all appropriate charges. And fourth, I paused, looking around the room, I want to be named acting CEO, pending a board vote for permanent appointment. The room erupted again, but this time it was different. People were arguing with each other, not with me. Richard was nodding. Patricia was wiping her eyes and looking at the financial evidence I'd presented. Sarah was on her phone, presumably calling the company's lawyers. David Thornton stood up suddenly. "I need to leave. I need to process this." "Of course," I said gently. "But David, you should know Vanessa is en route to this meeting right now. Or she thinks she is. She's carrying a forged power of attorney with my signature, planning to vote my shares over to a shell company, say she and Marcus control. When she lands, the FBI will be there to arrest her." David sat back down heavily. "Oh my God." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. David wasn't innocent in all this. He'd been betrayed too. "I know this is a lot to take in." "How long?" he asked quietly. "How long have they been?" 20 years, I said. "Since high school." He made a sound like he'd been punched in the stomach. The board meeting continued for another 3 hours. They voted unanimously to terminate Marcus and remove him from the board. They voted to launch a full investigation. They voted to refer everything to law enforcement. And they voted 11-0 with one abstention. David had recused himself to name me acting CEO. At 1 p.m., I walked out of that boardroom as the leader of Chen Industries. At 1:15 p.m., my phone rang. It was my lawyer. "Vanessa's plane just landed at Heathrow. The FBI is waiting at the gate." I closed my eyes and let myself feel it. The satisfaction, the vindication, the sweet, sweet taste of revenge. "Thank you," I said. "For everything. This is your victory, Emma. You did this. You beat them." I'd really, truly beaten them. The news broke that evening. Tech CEO arrested in elaborate fraud scheme. Brother-sister duo accused of conspiracy to commit murder. Chen Industries in crisis after leadership scandal. I watched the coverage from my hotel room, sipping champagne and feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. The photos they used were particularly damning. Marcus in handcuffs, looking disheveled and defeated. Vanessa being escorted off the plane in Reykjavik, her designer sunglasses askew, her carefully maintained composure shattered. My phone rang constantly, reporters wanting statements, board members with questions, lawyers with updates. I ignored most of them. There would be time for statements later. Time for interviews and explanations and spinning this into a narrative that protected the company's reputation. For now, I just wanted to savor this moment, this perfect, beautiful moment of victory. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You bitch, you fucking bitch, I'll destroy you for this. Vanessa. She must have convinced someone to let her make a call. I typed back, you already tried that. It didn't work. Another text, how did you know? How did you figure it out? I smiled. I'm smarter than you thought. That was always your mistake. Underestimating me. Marcus loved you. He really did, in his own way. Marcus loved money and power. I was just a means to an end. You're going to regret this. When this is over, when the truth comes out, everyone will see what you really are. And what am I? I asked. A manipulative, vindictive bitch who destroyed her own family for revenge. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed, you tried to kill me. You planned my murder. You talked about it like you were planning a dinner party. And you think I'm the villain here? No response. I set the phone down and poured myself more champagne. Tomorrow, I'd start the work of rebuilding Chen Industries, of rooting out the corruption Marcus had allowed to fester, of proving to the board that I deserved to be CEO, that Robert Chen had been right to trust me. But tonight, I was just going to enjoy this. I pulled out my laptop and opened my email. There was a message from Richard Chen, Emma. I just wanted to say again how sorry I am for what you've endured. My nephew is a monster, and I'm ashamed to share his blood. But I'm also immensely proud of you. You showed courage and intelligence that most people could never imagine. You've proven, Heike, that my brother was right to trust you. I look forward to working with you as we rebuild this company and restore its reputation. With deepest respect, Richard, I read it twice, feeling something warm and unfamiliar in my chest. It took me a moment to identify it. Pride, not smugness or satisfaction or revenge, just pride. I'd done this. I'd really done it. I'd taken the worst thing that had ever happened to me and turned it into a victory. I'd died and come back and won. I typed a response. Richard, thank you for your faith in me. I promise I won't let you down. Together, we'll make Chen Industries the company your brother dreamed it could be. Gratefully, Emma. I hit send and closed my laptop. Outside my window, London glittered in the darkness. Millions of lights, millions of lives, millions of stories. And somewhere in that vast city, in an FBI holding cell, Marcus Chen was sitting in a concrete room, probably still in shock, probably still trying to figure out how his perfect plan had fallen apart. I hoped he was suffering. I hoped he was terrified. But more than that, I hoped he understood. I hoped he knew that I'd beaten him, that I'd been smarter, faster, better than he'd ever given me credit for, that the woman he'd thought was a naive fool had been playing him all along. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Vanessa. I'm sorry for everything. I know you won't believe me, but I am. I stared at it for a long moment. Was she sorry? Or was this just another manipulation, another attempt to make me feel guilty, to make me second-guess myself? It didn't matter. Sorry didn't fix anything. Sorry didn't bring back the year of my life I'd lost in my first timeline. Sorry didn't undo the betrayal, the lies, the plan to murder me. Sorry was just a word. I deleted the message without responding. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. Marcus and Vanessa both went to trial. The evidence was overwhelming. My emails, the financial records, testimony from forensic accountants who'd traced their fraud back years. Marcus got 15 years for fraud and conspiracy to commit murder. Vanessa got 12. David Thornton divorced her before she was even sentenced. Chen Industries went through a rough patch. The scandal made headlines for weeks, and we lost some key clients who didn't want to be associated with the drama, but I worked 16-hour days to stabilize things. I met with clients personally, reassured them that the corruption had been rooted out. I implemented new oversight procedures, brought in outside auditors, restructured the board to prevent any one person from having too much power. And slowly, gradually, the company began to recover. 6 months after that boardroom presentation, the board voted to make me permanent CEO. The vote was unanimous. I was 33 years old, leader of a multi-billion-dollar company, and I'd earned every bit of it. I celebrated by taking a week off and flying to Bali, where I sat on a beach and did absolutely nothing except read novels and drink fruity cocktails. It was the first time in 2 lifetimes that I'd felt truly at peace. My phone rang on the third day. I almost didn't answer it. I was supposed to be on vacation, but the caller ID said it was Richard. "Emma, I'm sorry to bother you on your vacation." "It's fine," I said, sitting up and putting down my book. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Actually, something's very right. We just closed the Samsung deal, the one Marcus spent 2 years trying to land and couldn't." I smiled. "That's fantastic." "It's more than fantastic. It's a game changer. Emma, you've done it. You've not only saved this company, you've made it stronger than it's ever been." I felt that warm pride again, spreading through my chest like sunshine. "Thank you, Richard. That means a lot. Thank you for everything. My brother would be so proud." We hung up and I sat there on the beach watching the waves, thinking about Robert Chen and the faith he'd had in me. He'd seen something in me that I hadn't seen in myself. Not in my first life, anyway. He'd seen strength, intelligence, integrity. And he'd been right. I just needed a second chance to prove it. 2 years after the arrests, I got a letter from Vanessa. It came to my office at Chen Industries, forwarded through her lawyer. I recognized her handwriting on the envelope and almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity won out. "Dear Emma, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I don't deserve your attention, let alone your forgiveness. But I'm writing to you anyway, because I need to say some things that I should have said a long time ago. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean much coming from me, and I know it doesn't fix anything. But I need you to know that I understand now what Marcus and I did to you. I understand how wrong it was, how evil. Being in here has given me a lot of time to think about my choices, about who I became, about the person I could have been if I'd made different decisions. I loved Marcus. That's not an excuse, just a fact. I loved him from the time we were teenagers, and I let that love twist me into someone I don't recognize anymore. Someone who is capable of planning murder, of hurting an innocent person who'd never done anything but try to be kind to us. You didn't deserve what we did to you. You deserved better. You deserved the truth. I heard you're doing amazing things with the company, that you're a better CEO than Marcus ever was. I'm not surprised. You were always smarter than we gave you credit for. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even want it, really. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, that I see now what I couldn't see before, that if I could go back and change things, I would, but I can't. So all I can do is sit here and live with what I've done. I hope you're happy, Emma. I really do. You deserve happiness. Vanessa." I read the letter 3 times, trying to feel something. Anger, satisfaction, pity. But all I felt was tired. I put the letter in my desk drawer and went back to work. A week later, I got another letter, this one from Marcus. "Emma, I've had a lot of time to think about what happened, about what I did. And I still don't understand how you figured it out. You were so perfect, so trusting, so easy to manipulate. How did you know? How did you plan all of this?" It's eating at me, the not knowing. If I'm going to spend the next 15 years in here, I at least want to understand how you beat me. Please, tell me, Marcus. I read that letter once, then I burned it in the fireplace in my office. He didn't deserve an answer. He didn't deserve anything from me. Let him wonder. Let him drive himself crazy trying to figure out how his stupid, naive wife had outsmarted him. Let him spend the next 15 years in a cell, knowing he'd lost everything and never understanding why. That was a better punishment than any response I could give him. 5 years after the arrests, I met someone. His name was Daniel Park. No relation, just a common Korean surname. And he was a venture capitalist who'd approached Chen Industries about a potential partnership. We'd had dinner to discuss business, and somehow the conversation had turned personal. He'd told me about his failed marriage, his 2 kids who lived with their mother, his love of sailing. I'd told him about, well, a carefully edited version of my story. The basics of Marcus's betrayal, the legal battle, my rise to CEO. I didn't mention the rebirth. I never mentioned that. That was my secret, and it would stay that way forever. "You're remarkable," Daniel had said at the end of the dinner. "The way you rebuilt your life after everything that happened. Most people would have given up." "I'm not most people," I'd said. "No," he'd agreed. "You see, you're definitely not." We'd started dating slowly, meetings that turned into dinners, dinners that turned into weekend trips that turned into something more. He was kind, genuine. He had no hidden agenda, no secret plans. He just liked me. It was terrifying. What if he's lying? I'd asked my therapist. Yes, I had a therapist now because even revenge has its costs. What if this is all an act? "Emma," she'd said gently, "not everyone is Marcus. Not every relationship is a trap." "But how do I know?" "You don't. That's the risk of loving someone. You have to trust them. You have to make yourself vulnerable." I'd hated that answer, but I'd known she was right. So I'd taken the risk. I'd let myself fall for Daniel. I'd introduced him to my mother, to my friends at work, to the life I'd built. And nothing bad had happened. He just loved me. Simply and honestly and without ulterior motives. It was the strangest, most wonderful feeling in the world. We'd been dating for 2 years when he proposed. We were on his sailboat watching the sunset over the harbor, and he'd gotten down on one knee and pulled out a ring. "I know you've been through hell," he'd said. I know you have every reason to be scared of marriage, of trusting someone with your heart. But Emma, I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that not all men are like your ex-husband, that you deserve to be loved and cherished and supported." I'd cried. Actually cried. Something I hadn't let myself do in years. "Yes," I'd whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." We got married a year later in a small ceremony with just close friends and family. My mother cried through the entire thing. Richard Chen walked me down the aisle. Daniel's kids stood beside him as best man and maid of honor. It was perfect. Simple and honest and real. Everything my first marriage should have been and wasn't. 10 years after my rebirth, I stood on the balcony of my penthouse in Manhattan, watching the sun rise over the city. I was 42 years old, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, married to a man I loved and who loved me back, stepmother to 2 teenagers who'd accepted me into their lives. I'd won, completely and totally won. Marcus was still in prison, with 5 more years on his sentence. Vanessa had been released on parole but was struggling to rebuild her life. Last I'd heard, she was working as a waitress in New Jersey. David Thornton had remarried and moved to California. Richard Chen had retired and was spending his days playing golf. And I was here, living the life I'd always wanted but never thought I could have. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Good morning, beautiful. Coffee's ready when you are." I smiled and headed back inside. The journey had been long, painful, exhausting. But standing here now, looking at the life I'd built from the ashes of my first one, I knew it had been worth it. Every moment of planning, every second of pretending, every ounce of patience it had taken to wait 10 years for revenge. All worth it. Because I hadn't just gotten revenge, I'd gotten justice. I'd gotten my life back. I'd gotten a second chance and I'd made it count. I'd accepted the downgrade to coach. Her first-class flight had been canceled, and I'd risen higher than either of us had ever imagined possible. As I walked into the kitchen where my husband was waiting with coffee and a smile, I thought about that girl I'd been in my first life. The one who'd trusted too easily and loved too blindly and paid the ultimate price. She'd deserved better. And finally, after 2 lifetimes and more pain than anyone should have to endure, she'd gotten it. I'd gotten it, and I was never letting it go.